You know, the word midnight is fascinating because it tells two completely different stories about humanity. One is a story of almost perfect control and precision, and the other, well, it's a story about how terrifyingly close we might be to losing control altogether. So, on one side, you have atomic clocks. They are the absolute pinnacle of timekeeping, so incredibly stable that our entire modern world, our GPS, our internet, our financial markets, literally runs on them. And then, on the other side, you've got this deeply symbolic clock, a powerful metaphor telling us we're right on the brink of our own destruction. It's a heck of a paradox, isn't it?
And that's really the big question we're tackling here. How did this one specific moment, midnight, come to represent both our greatest triumphs of order and our deepest fears of chaos? Let's get into it.
All right, first up, let's talk about the literal midnight, the one that's all about rules, international standards, and some pretty mind-bending physics.
Have you ever really stopped to think about this question? It seems simple, but it's actually the source of a whole lot of confusion. Our everyday 12-hour clock system is, well, kind of broken. Think about it. AM means before midday, and PM means after midday. But noon and midnight aren't before or after. They are the moment itself. It's a tiny ambiguity, sure, but it can cause huge problems for stuff like booking a flight or signing a legal document.
So, to fix this, people in fields where mistakes are not an option, like the military, scientists, computer programmers, they just tossed the 12-hour system. They moved to the 24-hour clock, where the day kicks off at 000. No more confusion. And you can see the evolution here. To get even more precise for things like databases, they created the ISO standard. It makes it crystal clear that the end of one day, midnight, is simply the beginning of the next, 0000. In these worlds, you can't afford to be fuzzy. Precision is absolutely everything.
And that obsession with precision led us to this incredible number. This is the stability of the NIST F4 atomic clock. It works by measuring the vibration of cesium atoms, which is one of the most constant things in the entire universe. It is so accurate, it would take 100 million years for it to be off by a single second. That's the rock-solid foundation for our global time, UTC. It is, for all intents and purposes, the perfect clock.
Okay, now for a complete 180. We're going from the clock of perfect order to the clock of imminent danger, the Doomsday Clock. And where it came from? Well, it's probably not what you're thinking. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, many of the scientists who had worked on the Manhattan Project were absolutely horrified by what they'd created. They couldn't just walk away. They started the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists because they felt they had a moral duty to warn the world about what nuclear weapons could do. For them, this was no longer a scientific problem. It was a human survival problem.
And get this, the Doomsday Clock, this massive global icon of risk, it didn't start with some complicated scientific formula. It was a graphic design decision for a magazine cover. The artist, Marty Langsdorff, was trying to create a feeling of urgency, right? A clock just felt like a countdown. And why 7 minutes to midnight? Because, and this is a direct quote, it looked good. It's just wild to think about. An aesthetic choice became the symbol of the entire atomic age. From that one simple cover design, the clock took on a life of its own. It became this cultural barometer for how scared the world should be, with its hands swinging back and forth through the Cold War.
And you can see some of the dramatic swings right here. In 1953, it hit just 2 minutes to midnight. That's the closest it ever got during the Cold War, after both the US and the Soviets tested massive hydrogen bombs. But what's crucial to see is that the hands can move backward. 10 years later, a treaty banning some nuclear tests gave everyone a little breathing room, and the clock moved back to 12 minutes. The most hopeful it ever got, 1991. The Cold War was over, arms treaties were being signed, and the clock was set to a record 17 minutes to midnight. A huge sigh of relief.
For 60 years, doom on this clock pretty much meant one thing: nuclear annihilation. But in 2007, that changed in a huge way. The Bulletin scientists officially said, hey, there's another threat just as big as nuclear war, and that was man-made climate change. Suddenly, the clock's job got a lot more complicated.
Which brings us to right now. The clock today is at the most dangerous, most alarming setting in its entire 75-plus year history. 89 seconds. That's where we are. It's closer to midnight than it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And think about that for a second. We're not even talking in whole minutes anymore. That shift to measuring our risk in seconds was a very deliberate choice to signal just how fast things are getting worse.
So what's driving this unprecedented danger? The Bulletin now points to 3 big, tangled threats. First, The risk of nuclear war is back in a big way, with countries modernizing their weapons and regional conflicts threatening to spin out of control. Second, climate change is accelerating, with record heat and not nearly enough action. And now there's a new category: disruptive tech. We're talking about things like AI being used for warfare, massive disinformation campaigns that make it impossible to solve problems, and new biological threats.
And look, this isn't just a vibe or a feeling of doom. Just follow the money. In the last 5 years alone, global spending on nuclear weapons has shot up by 34%. That's not a world that's de-escalating. That's a new arms race, plain and simple. And it's a huge reason the clock is where it is.
And at the exact same time, the other crisis isn't waiting. 2024 was officially the hottest year ever recorded. It's just another stark piece of evidence that we are heading towards dangerous tipping points. These are not future problems anymore. They are today's emergencies.
So, with the clock this close to midnight, you have to ask, is this thing just a scare tactic? Is it designed to make us feel hopeless? Or is there something else going on here? Let's talk about what the clock is really trying to do.
Now, the clock definitely has its critics. Some people say it's way too simple, that it's more of a political statement than a real analysis. Some strategists even suggest a different metaphor, like a global pressure gauge. Instead of a countdown to a single disaster, imagine a big tank where all the world's problems, pandemics, cyber attacks, economic crises, are adding pressure. It's not about one single midnight, but about the whole system just breaking under the strain.
But this right here is the single most important thing to understand. The Doomsday Clock is not a prediction. The people who said it aren't claiming they can see the future. Think of it more like a doctor's diagnosis of the planet's health. It's the big flashing warning light on the dashboard of the world, and it's screaming at us to pay attention and do something before the engine blows.
So in the end, both these clocks, the perfectly precise atomic clock and the terrifyingly urgent doomsday clock, are really just reflections of us, of our choices. The same brilliance that lets us measure time to the billionth of a second also gave us the power to end all time. But the clock's hands can be moved back. We saw it in 1991. So the real question isn't what time is it? The real question is, what are we going to do about it? How are the choices we make today going to set the time for tomorrow?